possible.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. That means we have 24 minutes to learn a lot about Bluebeard, and I never knew what we're about to learn. And not only did I not know it, but apparently I only knew like a folklore version of Bluebeard, which
the good parts.
No, it wasn't good. It was bad.
Well.
I mean, the guy supposedly, well, in the story I knew, he killed his wives, right? And then he gives his wife a key, and she says, he goes out of town. He says, don't use the key.
Yeah.
Right? I'm vaguely remembering this from some years ago.
Right.
And then she drops the key in the blood, and and he's going to cut off her head, and the brothers come and rescue him, and he's dead. Remember?
Yes.
None of it is true. Apparently, there is a real guy, and I looked up the French pronunciation. I'm going to try to impress our guest who's listening in. I looked up the pronunciation of this name. Oh, where is it? Here it is. Gilles Duray. Gilles Duray. Doesn't look like that, but that's what it says. That's the real name of the guy who we came to know as Bluebeard, lived in the 15th century. And our guest has written a book. It's an outstanding book. It is called Bluebeard, Brave Warrior, Brutal Psychopath, and holy mackerel was he a psychopath.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, horrible. Killing children, and I'll let her tell you.
Yeah.
But anyway, Valerie has an amazing story in her own. I wish I could have gone with her to do the research. Mm-hmm. Well, for more than one reason. She's a cutie. But besides that, you know. Oh, no laugh. I didn't get a laugh that time. Usually I get a laugh. Valerie is a French scholar, an historian, a researcher, an editor. She served as the chair of the mayor's Animal Advisory Committee for the city of Philadelphia. Somewhere I read that she was an actress as well. And she served as president of the board of directors for the Pennsylvania Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Her book, Bluebeard, is about cruelty in the most obscene way, I guess you would say. And her story, let's see, where was this part about? She accidentally found out about Bluebeard when her nephew married his descendant.
Yeah.
And the family hushed all her questions. Wow, let's say good morning. Valerie Ogden. Good morning, Valerie.
Good morning, Larry. What an introduction. I love it.
Where are you right now?
Terrific. I'm in Philadelphia.
In Philadelphia. All right. Well, was this like a detour for you? It seems like everything else in your life has nothing at all to do with this.
Well, just as you said, I mean, it's fascinating. All I knew was what you knew about Bluebeard, and that is the Charles Perrault fairy tale. And he actually based his fairy tale on our character, Bluebeard, who was a real person. And when I got to this wedding, and this man of my nephew and this gentleman who happened to be related said to me, well, how do you like your nephew marrying into the family of a murderer? I thought my French had gotten rusty, and I just kept on staring at him. And then, of course, the bride came in, and we couldn't have any other conversation. So at the reception, I made a beeline for him, try to find out anything. He says, oh, I know nothing about him. I really know nothing except that, Charles Perrault based his fairy tale on him. But ask my mother. So I go to his mother, and she pretends that she has, some dread disease and runs away from me. So I tried to ask the others, and no one wanted to talk about him.
But this is half a millennium ago. This is more than half a millennium ago.
6 centuries. You're right. It's 6 centuries. So I was so curious because, you were right. I did study all French history, and I'd never heard of this person. So I thought, boy, this is something I've got to find out about. And as you delve into this man, you just sort of, you scratch your head because he honestly was, he was one of the richest barons in all of France. He owned over 75 properties, and we're not talking 3-acre plots. We're talking huge forests and towns and villages, wineries, granaries. And he also was Joan of Arc's protector on the battlefield. The king recognized him for his bravery, made him a Marshal of France, which would be equivalent today to a 5-star general in the U.S. Army, when he was 24 years old. He was the hero of France.
Wow, wow.
And he also was a renowned intellectual. He staged some of the most incredible theatrical productions, really would equal our Broadway productions today.
Wow, it's so hard to hear the good stuff about him when I already know the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you know, I mean, I could go on for which I.
So he had a lot of good stuff. So maybe, and there's a way that you connect his demise or his his transition from being a good guy to a super bad guy. I mean, super is a bad word.
Exactly.
An unbelievable bad guy. I don't know what word to use there. Yeah.
Well, you scratch your head and you wonder how such a many-faceted person became a serial killer. And interestingly enough, that no one knows. You know, you really don't know. But he was a returning soldier, and there is strong historic evidence which proves that he, flipped after he could not save Joan of Arc from the English, who burned her to death.
Right.
And it probably brought out latent psychopathy because his
what?
His parents were both killed. His father was gored by a wild boar. His mother died the same year, and he's brought up by this absolutely immoral grandfather who cared little about anything about him. And it's sort of all, when you start reading a lot of what happened to many serial killers when they were young, there are similarities. And he also fell into, the company of these horrible people who goaded him, egged him on. Anything he wanted to do was fine because they wanted to steal his money.
Wow. Okay, so what you haven't told the audience yet, though, is about is the word thousands, is that accurate? He killed thousands of children?
No one knows for sure, but in both trials, in the ecclesiastical trial, they said he killed 300, 400. In the secular trial, they said, and more.
Children.
And many people think.
Children.
Yeah.
Now, in
children and mainly boys.
I mean, killing people is bad enough. Killing children for some reason seems worse. And in the first story, the folklore story, the false story, he was killing his wives, which is bad enough. It's horrible.
I think Perot thought that it was better to kill your wife than your child. I think it was probably so brutal that he did not use that as his fairy tale. Here is the man who in Cinderella, who wrote Cinderella, the same thing. In his first version, he has the stepsisters chopping off the back of their feet so they fit into the slipper, So, I mean, he could have very easily.
Oh, really? Never heard that version.
Yeah.
And
people were very bloody in those days.
And one of the most amazing things about him is that he was 36 when they executed him. So he jam-packed a lot of this cruelty into a very short life.
Exactly. And it only started when he was returning soldier, and he went to his castles. He had nothing to do. And you look at returning soldiers today that have PTSD. When you have a lot of time on your hands, you begin to relive all your battle experiences. And I think it really exacerbates.
I think you might be right about that. Not to excuse anybody for that. Let me ask you to go back to the beginning when you were talking about the fact that you were trying to get information after you found out that your nephew was marrying a descendant of his. Did any of the information that you have in the book come from a conversation, or did you have to research everything?
I had to research everything. They would not tell me a thing. But it's very interesting. The nephew's wife came and stayed with us in March, and she's very, very bright. And I said, that Je dirais was very, very bright. She said, oh, yes, of course I know. So in other words, they know the history, but they
even though it's half of wow, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So oh gosh, so did you go into this thinking that the murderous past of this half a millennium ago relative was all about killing the wives, and then suddenly you've discovered some documents that indicated it was children, and was he having sexual relations is a bad word because it's not relations if you're raping somebody.
No.
But he was raping the children, right?
Torturing them.
He had terrible. I mean, it was bizarre sexual rituals in that he tortured, mutilated, and sodomized, then murdered them.
And you found this, but I mean, you found this documented somewhere.
Very interesting. There's information in English, where of course I started when I came home from this wedding in Belgium. But it's very dry, and you really don't understand. You don't really get a big picture of what went on. But of course, I mean, here people, when you mention the name Bluebeard, they think of Blackbeard, the pirate of the Caribbean, and are much more concerned with our own serial killers. So I did a lot of research in France, and got mainly my research out of the Bibliothèque, which is the library of Nantes, where many of his murders took place. And they're such helpful people. They would bring all this from their archives. They would bring old French manuscripts to me. That is Middle French, Old French, which is not regular French. So it took me quite a while to get the hang of, some of those documents.
As you're going through the documents and you discover the first piece of evidence that this guy was different than what the folklore tells you, which is all you would have known since the relatives didn't say much or anything.
Right.
What was the first? I mean, was it descriptive, or was it a blanket statement like he killed hundreds or whatever, or was there
more blanket statement?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a blanket statement. They referred to him, and very few of them referred to him as the hero of the 100 Years' War, which he really was. They all referred to him as that horrible murderer, where there was another side. As an actress, I'm sure you all understand, you cannot go in and play Lady Macbeth as evil. You have to figure out why she's evil, what made her do this. And that's, I think, what was sort of helped me try to figure out why. Why did this such a gifted person who had everything, lose his money? He spent all his money in these theatrical productions. Why did he start dabbling in the black arts? How was he kicked out of the military, which he was? He was a disgrace.
Right.
And then he has this explosive end where at his trial, when he is finally brought to trial, he confesses. And he's just in such tears and such remorse. And this is another part of the 15th century, which is incredible today, that the victim's parents forgave him and prayed for his soul.
Wow. Wow.
But he had people that were helping him too, though, get the children and coerce them.
He had probably 10 henchmen who, and 2 of them, I think, probably were a little bit loony. They really didn't understand what they were doing. But also, you have to remember, people back then, if you were not a noble, you were considered one step above chattel. You were either owned, or you were, a waif. And who cared about you? No one.
So there's an irony here that I want you to explore with us. He guarded a lady who became known as a saint in the Catholic Church, right? Joan of Arc, right? Yeah. Didn't she become a saint, right?
Yes,
okay.
She did.
And,
she did.
So there's a connection to religion or to godliness. And then he goes the exact opposite and starts worshiping the devil. Is that accurate?
But he really didn't. What he said, that was just temporary to get back his fortune that he lost. He thought, back then they honestly believed that God was on your left side or your right side and the devil was on the other, and they were competing for you and your soul. And he honestly just turned to the devil temporarily, he thought, to produce gold. And he murdered a child for the devil because his henchmen told him that's what was needed. And he had such remorse by doing this, which he didn't with his other killings. So this was all wrapped up with his religion. He was embedded in religion, in the Catholic religion. Yeah. He believed that he was truly a very good Christian.
Wow. As it unfolded, did it seem like there would never be an end to the information that you got? I mean, there's so much about him that suddenly we, for the first time, I mean, I may be wrong about that, but for me anyway, for the first time, you hear about this guy whose name I couldn't pronounce. What was it again? Gilles
DeRay.
You did very well.
Gilles DeRay. I had to look it up.
I couldn't either. When I first went, I called him Giles, and when I said, "Where is Giles' home?" and everybody was in stitches on the ground.
Oh, well, that's how I almost said it too. Just so you know, but I mean, we get to know this guy who. Well, I always thought Bluebeard was a real guy. I never knew that was actually a folklore. I always thought that was a real guy.
Yeah. So. And you'll love this, because if you're in horse country, you're in the beautiful horse country, he got his nickname Bluebeard because of his horse. Unlike most serial killers who torture animals, he loved his horse. He loved animals. He loved his horse called Nutcracker. And it was a black, glossy horse, and sometimes in the light it reflected, blue.
Wow.
So people called it Bleu, and then Barbe in French means Arabian. So it was an Arabian horse. So
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Bluebeard.
Oh, wow. And that is exactly what it does not say on Wikipedia. It says he had a blue beard. Just goes to show you not to trust everything on Wikipedia.
You cannot believe anything you hear anywhere. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was very interested in the history of his brother, because you said in the book that his brother died. When his folks died, his brother was a year old, and Bluebeard was a few years older than him. So that intrigued me about his brother. So I had to look him up, and you said that his brother tried to stop him.
He did. The whole family did. I mean, he did marry, and I think he married just, to have more property, and he did have a child. And the mother and the brother, his wife and the brother and the rest of the family did try to stop him, because they were losing all their money, because he was spending it all. He was spending all their inheritance.
Can I ask you about your travels to do the research and the feeling you got when you were standing in the very places that you were researching? What was that like?
The very interesting. That's a wonderful question, because one of my thoughts was, I think that almost was as important as the research, because I began to really have great pity for this man. And all I kept on looking at these wonderful chateaus, which are now falling down, and you just think, lost splendor. Why did he do this? Why? Here are these magnificent places. There is one place that is run by the French government. It's a cheesy tourist trap, I'm sorry to say.
No, is it really? Lots of keychains and stuff?
Yeah, well, they have. You go down into the torture chamber and so forth, and you really wonder whether this is a torture chamber. I don't know. But it still gives you a feeling, because of the staircases and the old crypt, and it's right on a river. And you feel, I felt very, very sad for this man.
So how did this change you? How did this change you? I mean, your background is so diverse. I mean, you were even a rock DJ on Fridays. Where is it, in Philadelphia?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that must have been fun, but that doesn't even seem close to what this is. Yeah.
I know. Well, everybody has many sides. We all are actors.
But did it change you at all? Now, let me ask you about that. I mean, with this, now that you've done this, I mean, you are more equipped as an actress, I would think. It doesn't have to be this kind of a role, but just as you mentioned with Macbeth, I mean, it's the same kind of a thing if you understand it.
I think what it does is it really does make you more humble, and it makes you more tolerant of people. Because you look at someone and, you just wonder, you wonder what's going on in our world today. And you say, how can these young kids flip and become killers,
Exactly.
And what you have to do is you've got to say, why? What made them? What are we doing that is not right that we're letting this happen? Type thing.
Yeah.
It makes you, I think, a more tolerant person.
The one thing that is different, though, than the average, news story about the guy who goes berserk and does crazy things is that this guy was a leader, like a president or something.
That's it. Yes, and that's why I think he got away with what he was doing for so long, because, the people really considered him to be the protector of his flock. He would he'd take mass with his, all his peasants, that all, and So, of course, they didn't, until they began to realize that when a child disappeared, either his henchmen were around or he was around. And just over and the people were so scared to come forward, but it built to such a crescendo that they did go to the Bishop of Nantes with their complaints. And at first he couldn't do anything because a man of that, magnitude, you can't, because this is all hearsay. And then Bluebeard made the great mistake of trying to get back one of his properties that he had sold, and he imprisoned a tonsured priest, and that started the Catholic Church looking into what he had been doing. And that's when they started to, when they took these people's laments seriously.
Yeah.
And there were just, hundreds of people who came forward.
Valerie Ogden is our
trial the same.
Valerie Ogden is our guest. Yeah, we need that part of it too. The book is called Bluebeard: Brave Warrior, Brutal Psychopath. I hope you've been listening, because then you know why brutal psychopath is part of the subtitle. Before we went on the air, though, you said something about how this is timely. Can you explain what you mean by that? What is happening right now that this is similar to?
Well, I think one with PTSD, that returning soldiers.
Oh, that part, yeah.
Obviously. Yeah, that for one, I think also, and I just looked over one of my chapters and I read the first part of what the English did, in France. They were as brutal as what's going on in the Middle East. So,
well, that's what I thought you meant, actually. I thought you were going to say that, because I think the same thing, that Boko harem, they're getting all these girls, or some of these ISIS guys, they're killing, just cutting their heads off on video. They're probably sexually abusing a lot of people, too.
Yeah, I would think so.
Oh, I think so. Certainly the British were. The British, they weren't called that. They call it, probably can't say it on air, so I won't, but they called them a name. And, my feeling with all of this is, what has changed, unfortunately, with war? Then, of course, we had this First, Second World War. You had the same thing with invasions, brutal invasions. Mm-hmm. So, what is wrong with us is my point.
Oh, that is a wonderful question. What is wrong with us?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, and especially somebody who's... in our country, we're supposedly being ruled, with quotes, by people who we put into a ruling position. Mm-hmm. But in those days, and in many places still in the world, people kind of steal that ruling position.
Yeah, they do.
Exactly. Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the most interesting things about your book is that I never knew there were two kings in France at the same time.
Oh, the little boy from Henry the Sixth, who was 10 years old, who had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
Wow. The time is almost.
The other thing about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I just, what I was going to say was, with the book, I did not dedicate it to my dogs or my husband or my children. I dedicate it to the end of Cannonballs, because I feel that is so important.
Yeah, wow, I do love that. I do love that. The end of Cannonballs, absolutely. I wish we would see that day one day. Well, you are a great guest, Valerie. Thank you so much for being on the air. I hope that everybody reads the book. And as an actress, I bet you're hoping this is made into a movie. It seems like it would be a perfect movie.
It would be a very interesting movie. Yeah, I just have to say the book will be released October 30th. It has not been released yet. You have a special edition. So it will be both on Amazon and History Publishing. Probably might be even where it has been published.
All right, excellent. And we have a copy here. If I have somebody, I can't take your call on the air, but off the air, call me. You can have the copy that was sent to us. You will love it. And we will put the websites on Facebook so you can get it. HistoryPublishingCo.com is what we have right now. Valerie Ogden, thank you so much. What a great interview. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. Dallas nurse Nina Pham is now virus-free, according to health officials who say she will be discharged from the NIH Clinical Center, where she is being treated for Ebola. Meanwhile, details on Dr. Craig Spencer, New York City's first Ebola patient. He's now being treated at Bellevue Hospital.
He was brought here yesterday morning after developing a fever and gastrointestinal symptoms. Spencer was working in Guinea with Doctors Without Borders, who says he followed their protocols when he returned to the U.S. last week. week. His fiancée and 2 others have been quarantined as a precaution.
Fox Radio's Tanya J. Powers at Bellevue Hospital. The World Health Organization says millions of doses of 2 experimental vaccines could be ready next year. And police in New York City say an officer who suffered a serious head wound after being attacked with a hatchet remains in critical but stable condition. Fox News. We report, you decide.
You use the motor oil Dad used, and he uses what Granddad used. Yet no one uses what Great-Granddad used, because whale oil's illegal. But if oil's what you need, Napa has you covered. With Castrol GTX for only $3.79 a quart, or 5 quarts in a Napa Silver filter for just $21.99. No harpoons needed. Conquer the job with Napa Know-How. General states pricing. Sales prices do not include applicable state, local taxes, or recycling fees. At participating Napa Auto Parts stores. Offer expires 11/16/14.
Pete's Parrot Emporium.
Pete? Pete?
How may I help you?
Help! Help!
Be quiet.
Quiet! Quiet! Quiet!
Silence.